Okay, people. My name's Robert Davis. I'm chair of the Road Danger Reduction Forum. This is our update, 4th of August. Last week's presentation is here, and you can read the original article there. Now, to kick off with, a certain person who is on Twitter referred to Ideas with Beers and said, it's not much good because the people there don't seem to be banging on about the need to stop car ownership in cities, which actually I think a lot of us would be quite keen on, although we don't have it as our sort of headline. And despite that, he said it's very influential. So although it's very influential, but not good on the thing he likes, he said, what are you doing in terms of diversity issues? Well, so I thought I'd actually put that in as a question mark. What are we doing about diversity? Well, in the last few months, there's been stuff on cycling for all for people with disabilities. Lucy Tausig did something on highway design with women in mind. There may be a need to do something on Black and ethnic minorities. I shall leave it with the host. So just thought I'd mention that. So if you want any of the links before they are on the YouTube or on the sharing platform by Simon, do get in touch with me there. And we're still operating on the basis of what was announced last week, once in a lifetime opportunity. Yeah. Okay, so let's see what's been happening and whether we are actually moving forward or not moving forward, what we can do. Just a reminder of all those documents from last week, which you should have. You should read through gear change in detail. Those of you who want to be concerned with the precise details of infrastructure design, the LTN 120 is there. Don't forget the Highway Code Review consultation document. Cycling UK have made it easy to send in some responses. We at RDRF are going to do a longer, more considered one because we think there are still problems with cycle helmets and high vis in particular. Okay, so there's still problems with delay, still delays in the Inspectorate and Active Travel Commissioner. Delay in when schemes are started, should have been started, when they're completed. And I also thought I'd mention to you that Mr. Dipesh J. Shah, OBE, is the new chairman of Highways England. As you know, Transport Action Network are setting up a legal challenge to the £27 billion road building programme. He's formerly of the UK Atomic Energy Authority and should therefore know something about climate change, although as LTT says, he has also held several senior positions at BP. So I don't know really whether he's going to be interested in reducing climate change. There we go. Okay, this came with some general news first. This caused a lot of fuss from Audi, who managed to shoot themselves in the foot with that particular advertisement. Lets your heart beat faster in every aspect. A lot of people got very annoyed about that. The wonderful Jeremy Vine said this is the most revolting car advert I've ever seen. It actually radiates danger. Then Audi said, no, we've got automatic braking systems and spelt brakes. And they said it's very safe. The safety ratings for those inside are quite high, but guess what? Not for pedestrians. And they referred to pedestrians as the weakest traffic participant, which is a new twist on the vulnerable road user, which we know and hate. SUV and big car advertising is being questioned with campaigns about whether it should be allowed and campaigns against it. Do see Roger Harabin's article there. Yes, so that's Transport Action Network. They're bringing the case against the 5-year road investment strategy on climate change and air quality grounds. Do try and help them with some money. Someone called Brian Deegan has done a little video, low traffic neighborhood step-by-step network planning, quite short. It's about a dreadful place called Harpenden, which is pretty crappy, and how it could be made less crappy. And it's been given endorsement by Vincent Stops, who says this is the Hackneyification of Harpenden. So do have a look. It's actually about how to build a cycle network and all the various things. And it's actually quite easy to understand. You don't have to be an engineer. Okay, in the press, big editorial in the Times, basically supporting what Johnson's done. And look at the end of it. It says, keeping them on 2 wheels, that's the new people cycling, will require ministers to prepare themselves for a backlash from motorists resentful of sharing spaces they have been accustomed to owning, and to hold their nerve, beg your pardon, telling government to hold its nerve. Wholesale behavioural change is never easy for governments to engineer. In this case, any political pain will be worth it. So good editorial there from the mainstream Times. Of course, the Times, as usual, managed to ruin it by having an idiot going on about the outlaw mentality of cyclists. I mentioned last week's Sunday Times article on LTNs. That was there. We discussed that. Now, there was further coverage of Lambeth LTNs in Newsnight the next day. There's a picture of one of the LTNs in Lambeth. And the people there have done some monitoring of whether motor traffic has increased on neighbouring roads, and guess what, it hasn't. There's a fellow called Mr. Keane who's been monitoring what actually happens in surrounding areas, and a very good local activist called Last Not Lost. If I surf around the traffic cams around the oval low traffic neighbourhood, where's the congestion? So good to see people getting in on that. And some comments from the very wonderful Councillor John Burke. Low traffic neighbourhoods do not displace through traffic onto main roads. Main roads displace traffic onto residential roads. Other people's neighbourhoods should not be used as a pressure release valve for the fact that there are too many cars on the road. And a nice little quote there, when everybody who's opposing it complains about not being consulted. Just out of interest, for those many people living on rat runs, can you remember when you were consulted about whether or not you wanted through traffic using your neighbourhood as a shortcut racetrack? Another tweet from him coming up against the cabbies, being a bit rude to him and saying disabled passengers require door-to-door service. I'm not sure LTN's actually stopped that. The cabbies always go on about how they're there for disabled people. Some other comments that come up in Liverpool, local councillor Steve Richard Radford compared pop-up bike lanes to things which happen in North Korea. He also says he likes bike lanes. He just that you know, not where he lives, or he wasn't told about it or something. And good old cycling Mikey, he's still getting aggravation and he's still standing up for himself. I hope I'm going to invite him to our Road Peace conference to speak about third-party reporting. And don't forget, the 2020 Comprehensive Spending Review has been launched, and we need that if we're going to bump up the 2 billion spend up to where it should be. So yeah, just, you know about that invitation. I've shown you that before in the letter. The submission deadline for your local authorities, don't know about London, but for local authorities in England is this Friday. Okay, so let's look at what's been happening in the UK on the ground, and it really all depends where you live. It's not, I was going to say postcode lottery, but it's not a postcode lottery in terms of just the odds. It's whether your local authority gives a damn or doesn't give a damn. And I thought I'd mention this because it's really, how are we going to hold people to this? Because lots of people are complaining that really it isn't going in, it isn't going fast enough. They aren't making the bids properly, except with some exceptions. And if you look at the main document, it says, Active Travel England's assessment of an authority's performance on active travel will influence the funding it receives for other forms of transport. And it says sustainable travel outcomes, particularly cycling and walking, will be taken into account when considering funding allocations for local transport schemes. So, you know, it repeats it in the final sentence. That's the thing we've got to hold over them, to say, you're not going to get paid for other stuff if you don't do this. And, you know, we've raised this from the beginning. What can Department for Transport or authorities like Transport for London actually do to get people in so many places who don't give a damn to do what they should be doing? So Warwickshire, pretty bad. They only got 50% funding first tranche. Announced they'll remove pop-up cycle lanes and reopen pedestrian streets because of increasing traffic volume. And Adam Tranter, who's the Coventry cycling mayor, wrote to Warwickshire County Council and said, pointed out they appear to believe that tranche 2 of the Active Travel Fund is too restrictive. Well, that's what it's supposed to be. It's supposed to be very clear about stuff that you're required to do. And there is now over £1 million on the table, now at risk. It comes as their deputy leader retweeted material claiming cycle lanes are green insanity. Something good, there's Newcastle Grey Street. Although elsewhere in Newcastle, the Gateshead cycle lane was removed before even being used. I don't know if I'm right about that. Newcastle people can correct me. Don't forget, if I'm not if it's not in my neighborhood, I may not know the full story. There's been a video of Cardiff city centre, which you can get to there, which is very nice, showing the cycling and walking in Cardiff city centre. Northants, oh, the family bicycle have been on the case there, because they, this is what I tweeted last week, they've received £351,000 and one temporary widening of the footpath has been agreed. And we don't know about tranche 2. What is it being spent on? Or bid for? And the update from last week is no update. And the all-party parliamentary cycling and walking group point out that it's 4 weeks from when the money was in the account. So stuff should have started happening. I don't know what happens if they don't spend the money within the required time, or if they spend it on the wrong thing, or if it's not completed within the 8 weeks. Presumably it'll be clawed back. And so the locals have been campaigning about that. They've done a critical mass in Wellingborough, as a video you can look at there. by Samuel Shoesmith. Quite nice to see a group of people out. Okay, other things. Sorry, in Ewell, the bus gate was dropped because of local opposition. In Sefton, 2 cycle routes were starting yesterday. And in Salford, you have a low traffic neighborhood, and note the signage. Yes, a sign which has migrated from Lambeth. Very good. Lambeth is fine. So we like that kind of sign, no kind of road closey type stuff. Bristol, Baldwin Street and Bristol Bridge closed to general traffic in the last couple of days, but compliance with signs not very high yet, early days. And 4 bus gates like this one have gone in the city centre. Okay, this is Inverness. I got since we're doing roundabouts today, I got a query about this. The guy does the Zen Bike website said, we've got 1.1 meter advisory cycle lanes going into the roundabout. I think 1.1 is non-compliant, but he said they're going in and I get left hooked. You know, well, what's to stop me from getting left hooked to come in there, get left hooked if I've gone into the, you know, is the answer advanced stop line boxes? So you might like to mention fluke roundabout when you do your roundabout thing. Okay, back to policing. I want to put this up again because it's a clear statement from Superintendent Cox of Metropolitan Police saying he encourages use of head cam and third-party reporting by cyclists and by others. When you see tweets from people like him, it always helps say, well done, good work, like what you're doing, blah, 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 retweeting and so on, because there'll be plenty of angry petrol heads complaining, and you know, it's good for you to give some support for them. I also mention it because policing elsewhere in the United Kingdom is not like that necessarily. You may know that Road Danger Reduction Forum has been Secretariat for the West Midlands Police Traffic in Road Harm Prevention Team. And we've been working with them since 2016 to disseminate best practice on policing close passing of cyclists, to collate who's doing what, and to disseminate that information to other police services. Now, what West Midlands Police did is they had the cyclist in plain clothes with the camera who would radio on ahead when close passed. The motorist is pulled in, is given a little chat, told that they should give 1.5 meters. If they have defective eyesight or there are other offences, then they're charged with them. They are, if they are not polite or willing or genuinely repentant, they get charged, and they have either an afternoon course to go on or 3 penalty points and a fine. And thousands of charges have been made successfully. But a lot of police services are claiming to be interested, but they're not doing that. They're not stopping police, and they're not stopping drivers, and they're not charging them. Or even giving them a basic chat and information. What they're doing is a bit like what's happening here. This is in North Wales, the Roads Policing Unit. You can read about there, is giving out a gilet. Now, you know, I don't actually know if a driver going past you, this is done actually by the unit that polices trunk roads, is actually going to be able to see that, and if they are, will know what it's about. And so it transpires that what they're really doing is a bit more of the old high-vis stuff. Hey, that's good. Hey, that's dreadful. And so, you know, they've done the press release, but I don't think they're really getting the message over. And sure enough, they have in the press release a kind of even Stevens, we'd like motorists to do this, we'd like cyclists to do that, which is, in my view, getting it all wrong. So when police services do the right thing, support them. When they don't, ask them where their evidence is for what they're doing. Ask them if they're doing policing of close passing of cyclists. Now, this is a tweet coming down to London. I haven't seen TfL do anything new this week. I may be wrong. Apologies if that's the case. Remember when I brought this up last week, I referred to a piece by LCC in which they said they'd like to see TfL and City Hall providing boroughs with more clarity, explaining what needs to be done, what money has been given for, when it should be done, mentoring in providing those boroughs with no experience in showing them what to do, and oversight, checking up that they are doing the right thing, and if they aren't, to claw the money back. Now there is another, since then, a good article, I think it's written by Ashok, the CEO of LCC. After last week's announcement, he makes this important comment: finally, we have political will at the top of government to address society's chronic overdependence on motor cars and all the problems that flow from it. Or do we? This is the question we ask ourselves every week. So Ashok has 5 key tests. And really, it's the first 2 that are the key tests, in my view. The first one is to meet the challenge of the climate emergency. LCC did a very good report showing how London can and should decarbonise our roads by 2030. And talking about England as a whole, Ashok says, the programme announced must in future scale up by at least an order of magnitude and be sustained for the next decade and more if road transport is to be made zero carbon across all of England. It really needs to be done. Also worth pointing out that an important document on how to achieve decarbonisation has been done by a charity. Should have been done by government or a body I would have hoped like TfL. The second point he's making is reinvest the £27 billion roads programme in cycling and public transport to both cap off demand for car journeys and fund the sustainable alternatives. Those are the main key tests. There's also devolve funding and decision making, help those who need it most, going for the disadvantaged communities. As you know, I always bang on about direct support for cycling. That's particularly needed for people on rough estates who haven't got a place to keep a bike, possibly haven't got the money to get hold of a roadworthy bike, and also a kind of walk the walk thing of getting relevant officials to ride bikes and walk. But the 2 first points are the important ones, I think. Back to Lambeth, some nice signage there again at the low traffic neighbourhood. Brent is apparently about to start doing something about bleeding time. Kingston, a report from Kingston Cycling Campaign, very active local cycling campaign there. Kingston Bridge, which I showed a few weeks ago, currently less congested than usual. That's worthwhile mentioning. Wandsworth Barham High Road cycle lane was about to go in yesterday. And Islington, this is an important one. The local campaigners went round and asked people how they'd been affected by the low traffic neighbourhoods and whether they thought they were good or not. And they got a very positive response. So look at that article. It may give you an idea of how to, once you've got an LTN, how to keep it in, how to get the support out there for it. David Arditi asked which LTNs in London are any good. So I just looked at what people said in response, and big applause for at least those first 2 of the 4 in Lambeth, a couple in Southwark, or 1 rather, Croydon, I don't know the names of them, but that got support. And two of them, St. Peter's and Canterbury East in Islington. Lee Green and others in Lewisham, although there is a problem with the low traffic neighbourhoods that I mentioned last week, with drivers just going through, issues maybe with that sign and the camera symbol. We don't know why they're not working or how we could get them to work. I think we should have a little session on how to make sure they are working. Also in London, I mentioned last week that this was going to be taken out, a new arrangement for the bus stop, new arrangement at the junction. Yesterday it was still like that, so a bit of heel dragging there. What they have done is put in some parking spaces for dockless hire bicycles, converting car parking bays in Fitzrovia, Bloomsbury, Holborn and Covent Garden into bicycle parking. We like that. Hat tip to Linus Rees. He's a very good local activist. If every borough, every council had someone like him, everything would be very good. He's plugging ahead with trying to get a low traffic neighbourhood in Fitzrovia, which is part Camden, part Westminster, but he's not getting very far. Okay, now here's another hat tip to Last Not Lost. He noticed this on London Road in Merton. You can see his advisory gone in there, centre line's been shifted over. And he'd noted on one of the council documents that they said it's mandatory, but it's not, it's an advisory. There's no notice of whether it was funded from DFT or TfL. He points out that it's not linked in to any cycle route. So those are, you know, again, local activists talking about things. Another hot thing in London is a campaign to keep Hammersmith Bridge closed to motor traffic. Variety of local groups, including yours truly, are signing letters writing to the 4 councils involved, asking for it to be kept closed. And here's a bit of some work done by Barnes Community Association. It did a survey which claims that 9,000 of the 22,000 car journeys that used to cross Hammersmith Bridge daily have simply evaporated. So there's a bit of evidence for you. Now, Kensington, Chelsea, would you believe? They've come up with this. First of all, 185 grand from TfL, 100 from Department for Transport, 50 grand of their own money, and they'll have 20 mile an hour across the borough, temporary protected cycle lanes on Kensington High Street and Queen's Gate, new cycle parking, upgrading Chelsea Ridge Road cycle lanes to light segregation, some pavement widening, up to 10 new school streets, closures to streets for the markets, and some other closures to motor traffic. So good old Kensington and Chelsea, but they have pulled their idea for their first low traffic neighbourhood, and there was an FOI on that, and they responded saying that when it came to it, there were 4 emails for it, 54 against it, local residents association with 72 pages of objections, ward councillors, etc. And they said they wanted to put it in basically, but it's actually a Labour ward and they don't want to impose things on the minority group. Must say I've never heard that before, but that's what they say. And they also say there are also capacity issues around having officers pressing on with an unpopular scheme at a time when they're being asked to do lots of other popular things around the borough. Well, you know, that's, I would have thought the unpopular ones are often the ones which are most necessary, but there you go. And again from last week, video stills of cycling through, stills and video cycling through London. And don't forget what Cycling Embassy of Great Britain are doing with Alex Ingram. Here are your usual campaigns and reading, etc. There's the Transport Action Network scheme. I'm going to read Cycling UK on what you have to do. That's Brian's thing there on low traffic neighbourhoods, Transport for New Homes report, the Oxfordshire Livable Streets video, Alex's thing for Cycling Embassy of Great Britain. Oh, as a survey reported today in Bike Biz, only 1 in 10 cyclists think that the UK government takes cycling safety seriously, and just 12% say that their local council takes cycling safety seriously. That actually was done by an insurance body which said, don't, you know, these are some helpful hints, high vis, not helmets actually, although they talk about safety gear, and don't forget to get our insurance. These surveys are often actually quite small samples, not very good done by insurers and others, but you know, quite interesting nevertheless. And there's some other things to read from previous weeks. Don't forget your consultations. Transport decarbonisation has to be done soon. Roads policing one, don't forget. The London 24/7 bus lanes, and the highway code. That you've got some time for the highway code, but don't forget it. And here's a tweet from Ben Goldacre. The dangerous, entitled attitude of car drivers is one of the biggest threats to road safety for all. I actually tweeted back and I said, I don't think it's one of the biggest threats. I think it is the biggest threat. In fact, I think you could come down everything. Councillors opposing what needs to be done with cycle lanes, low traffic neighbourhoods, etc., is all about the dangerous, entitled attitude of car drivers. A few other bits and pieces from cabbies and road freight. And oh yeah, we've had some arseholery from Pimlico plumbers you might have seen. But that is what it's all about. Entitlement, over-entitlement. We need to explain why it is not justified. And we need to be looking at an overall situation, if I can finish up on this note, of how, as Mark Treasure, I think, pointed out right at the beginning, some places which have keen politicians and the vigorous cycling lobby will get some good things, and the ones that don't will get nothing. So we'll be having more danger or the same danger in some places and it getting a bit better in others. And we really need to wave the big stick of how they won't get money for further schemes, and possibly their roads may be taken over by DFT or TfL, or at least those roads that need work done on them. And so that's where we are. We really do need that push from above, but also, of course, don't forget your local campaigning to get in the press about how people do actually like your low traffic neighbourhoods and they aren't causing massive congestion. And if there is congestion, then think of other ways to reduce car usage. Okay, that's me.
Okay, I'm going to run through an overview of some work TRL did a few years ago now, and it was part of a programme of off-street trials that we did for TfL of various kinds of cycling infrastructure, much of which has now appeared on the street. The Dutch Roundabout was probably one of the higher profile ones, but there was less immediate implementation of those designs. So to sort of start off, a key part of the Dutch Roundabout is that it's based on continental geometry, as it's commonly referred to, and side-by-side comparison of what we mean by that. In the UK, the standard roundabout design has a very, it has wide circulating carriageways, it has large turning radii at entries and exits. This is to make it easy for traffic to enter and to join, but of course it leads to high speeds, high entry speeds, high circulating speeds, higher traffic capacity, but it's much worse for cyclists and pedestrians. Whereas the continental geometry, it has perpendicular approaches, much tighter geometry, and generally just a single lane on the circulating carriageway. The Dutch style roundabout, of course, there's lots of different designs used in the Netherlands, but this was referred to as the Dutch style, picking up certain elements of it. This combines the continental geometry with a priority orbital lane. So here's a drawing of it. It's quite hard to see in the detail, but I think the presentations will be available afterwards. So broadly speaking, we have going around the outside a lane that is segregated, in this case with curbs, and then with marked priority lanes on each of the arms. For the design that we carried out at TRL, there were actually 4 different designs of the arms. So arm 1 here had curb segregated approaches and exits that were linked. So the approach roads were curb segregated, leading to the segregated track on the roundabout itself. The second arm was approach via a mandatory cycle lane, with quite a sharp turn into the orbital track. Exiting was into the main carriageway. On the third arm, cyclists approached within the vehicle lane, so with all the other traffic, exiting into a mandatory cycle lane. And the fourth one, the cyclist approached with the other traffic in the vehicle lane and exited into a segregated track, which eventually rejoined the main carriageway. On the first build, Dutch road markings were used, and there's an example here. And then these were then modified for more standardized UK markings, as there's only so many new things you can do in the UK. So we thought we'll have to do this to see how it works with standard UK markings. The methodology used here, so we built the roundabout on a part of the TRL test track area, which sadly is now being built on as part of an extension of Bracknell. We recruited members of the public as participants. The idea was that they were recruited without prior knowledge of what the scheme was about. They were given simple instructions on what we wanted them to do. So drive the roundabout and turn right, take the third exit, those sort of instructions. We didn't say, this is an unusual kind of roundabout, this is what the markings mean, this is what we intend you to do. We wanted to see how people would respond when they first encountered it and on subsequent drives round. Some of the trials, the participants just used the infrastructure by itself without any other road users. Then we went on to more complex ones where we actually looked at interactions, and that was initially with what we call controlled users, basically our staff who were told to set up a particular situation, or with later on other members of the public as participants. And after completing the maneuver, the participant was asked a few questions. So how safe did you feel? How easy was it to get round? How did you use it? And at the end of the whole trial, we did a questionnaire, and in some cases, for some of them, a focus group. And just to be clear what we mean by a conflict, the definition we use, what's an observable situation in which 2 or more road users approach each other in space and time to such an extent that a collision is imminent if their movements remain unchanged. So we're looking at, have people had to change their behavior, take some kind of avoiding action. This is a close-up just to show where we were focusing our attention for looking at interactions. So we had both pedestrians crossing on zebra crossings, which was one area of conflict, and then the actual crossing of where the where the cycle track becomes unsegregated to cross the entry and exit lanes. And here is the built scheme in all its glory. It looks a bit strange without any traffic or any surrounding roads. So we had various ruses such as vehicles parked to obscure sight lines and things, so it didn't look too artificial. And we'd marshal the various different groups away from the roundabout and give them their instructions, and timed people's approaches. So we'd get a cyclist to leave at a fixed time, we'd get a driver to leave at a fixed time, with the idea being that they would meet in around the place where we want to see the interaction on the roundabout. And you can see the different designs of the 4 different arms there. So we got a lot of information from this. We did a lot of trials, and we looked at interactions between cyclists and cycling and car drivers, cyclists and other cyclists, cyclists and pedestrians, pedestrians and drivers. So just a very, very quick summary here of the one that's probably the greatest focus today, which is the interaction between drivers and cyclists. And what we particularly wanted to know was, did drivers give cyclists the priority that we were expecting at the entries and exits? And the behaviour varied for each of the 4 arm types, and the percentage is the percentage of non-compliance by drivers across the different trials for the different types of designs. A point to stress here is that actually defining who gives priority is quite difficult, because, or who gives way is quite difficult, because you don't necessarily know the intentions. Different road users, when they're at a junction, will often negotiate with each other. So in some cases, the driver may have gone first because the cyclist let them go and it was clear. So there may have been, there were not necessarily any danger or unexpected behaviour, but that would have been recorded as a loss of priority by the cyclist. So this is when the cars were entering the roundabout, and this is when they were exiting the roundabout. And the most interesting thing that struck us on that was that the drivers were actually more likely to give priority when they were exiting the roundabout than when they were entering it, which is the opposite as what might be expected, considering when you're joining a roundabout, you're most likely to be looking out for circulating traffic. The key findings when we pulled it all together were that what we called here the arm 1 and the arm 4 are preferred. Now those are the 2 designs in which there was a degree of segregation on the approach. So that actually segregation on the approach is really, really important, because then you're then getting people in the position to cross, and you're avoiding those conflicts that occurred when people were rejoining the main traffic flow. The overall conclusions were that actually, and this is across all different user groups, people were generally positive about them and felt that there were safety benefits. In some cases, this was a change of opinion for people, because a lot of people's initial response when they see this is, oh my God, this is going to be terrible, it's going to be disastrous. How can you possibly expect drivers to give way to cyclists circulating across when normally drivers have priority? And of course, as is so often the case with these things, people do actually respond to the infrastructure that's given to them. So if you build something that says, expect to see people crossing here, expect to give way, people do actually respond to that. There were some concerns expressed, and this is in the surveys and the focus groups, that the priority wasn't sufficiently clearly stated. So there was support for markings and signs, and also in fact for raised tables to reinforce the priorities and the reduced speeds. For the arms where the cyclist had to rejoin the carriageway rather than continue off in a segregated track, there was some uncertainty about who had priority. The markings actually showed that the drivers on the main carriageway had priority, but very often they did actually give way to cyclists joining. This oddity that drivers were less likely to recognise priority when entering than when exiting. But of course, in some cases that was to do with cyclists maybe being more willing to give priority, maybe because of the sight lines. There was some concern when we involved lorry drivers on this, and incidentally we didn't mix the users for this because of the risk, but we had people driving lorries around and telling us what they saw. And there was some concern that the sight lines meant that the lorry drivers would find it difficult to see cyclists on the orbital lane. So it's a point to be aware of in terms of potential trial sites. This key conclusion that segregation is very important for the exit and entry, and we would strongly recommend if anyone trials such a thing that you do have this segregation, and also that you start in locations where you've got low vehicle flows but high cyclist and pedestrian sites, because we do need the visibility of the vulnerable road users to draw attention of the drivers to expect to see them, and that this is a space where you expect to see those users and should therefore give way. So that's a quick tour of the Dutch Roundabout, and I should put a picture of it back again just to close.
So very quickly then, about 10 years ago, the local members for this area, and for those of you that don't know, this is the Queen Edith Way sort of Fendham Road area in Cambridge, which is probably sort of 400 or 500 yards from Addenbrooke's and the Cambridge Biomedical Campus. Incredibly busy area. They had a bit of a campaign for better cycling and walking facilities in the area. And as a result of this, there was quite a sizable pot of Section 106 monies granted towards ped and cycle improvements. And then as a result of that, we carried out a number of consultations in 2015 and 2016, which highlighted the existing Fendham Road roundabout as a major block to cycling and walking in the area. As a result of that, about 3 years ago, I came up with the idea of, a fully inspired Dutch roundabout in this location. And since then, myself and Vanessa have had many sleepless nights and a quite a difficult last 3 years in getting this to where we were when it opened on Friday.
Is that it, Grant?
Yep.
Handed the baton.
Well, I can tell you about some of the difficulties we've faced. For instance, with the DFT, bit of a battle about signage and markings. You may notice on the GA drawing in front of you that there are inverted triangles on all four arms. We had to take off 3 of them because it's not allowed in the TSRGD. The one on the east arm remains because, as you'll see, the cycle lane is actually sort of separate from the zebra crossing, and that's because there's unfortunately an access sort of between them, and our road safety auditors didn't want the owners of that property backing out onto the zebra crossing. So as such, we can have our triangle on that arm, but not on the others, which was disappointing because, in approaching the design, we want to have it all singing, all dancing with every possible signage and marking to alert drivers to this new bit of infrastructure. And so with signage, we're still trying to work out, the best solution. And what we feel at the moment is that the current best solution doesn't actually exist. So we're having to make do with some temporary signage of the new road layout ahead and cycle and pedestrian priority crossing, and give way to cyclists' signs on the approaches, but they don't exactly stand out. So that is a concern to drivers going through here. But one of the things that Martin Lucas Smith pointed out, CamCycle, was that the vast majority of drivers using this roundabout will be using it on a almost daily basis. So quite quickly they'll get used to it. And equally, new people coming up to it, I think it's already been said this evening, they're going to be going, oh my God, what do I do here? We trust that, the classic Dutch design makes it very clear what each road user should be doing. We tried it out for cargo bikes, because there are, you'll notice on the, going from the southern arm to the west arm, there's quite a tight bend there, but we tried it out with the clapped out old county cargo bike, which is incredibly long, and we did manage to just about get it around that corner. So, but that's not a move that many people would make in any case. So, and nor would HGVs normally make that move, because it doesn't make any sense. You'd be on a you know, a separate road on Hills Road rather than taking a left there. So we weren't so worried about that, and we have actually banned HGVs from taking that left turn. I mean, one of the things that our sort of senior directors have been concerned about is HGVs and the whole, you know, visibility thing. And our friends in Holland pointed out that HGVs do have a higher sort of accident incident rate with roundabouts than normal traffic, but equally they do at signalized junctions as well. So, you know, and you know, tight left turns anywhere in a city, you know, it's the same story. So, you know, whilst these sort of, you know, issues have been flagged up as we've been developing the design, I think, you know, you have to be quite sort of philosophical about wins and losers. And we're also aiming to have the vegetation in the middle of the roundabout in the center grow up quite high, because again, the Dutch said it's much better to make drivers look at what's immediately in front of them rather than be looking over the other side of the roundabout to anticipate what's going on over there. They're more likely to notice the pedestrians and cyclists right in front of them if they can't see beyond. And I think the day that our roundabout opened, Friday, was also tragically a day that on the edge of Cambridge, a cyclist was killed at a standard UK roundabout with fast speeds. Don't want to, you know, tempt fate, but I'm hoping that the slower speeds at this roundabout will ensure accidents are, you know, less dramatic, cause less injury. So
I'll just say a huge thank you to Grant and Vanessa, because this project has been difficult, you know, something this big and such a big change. It's been hard in the community, and I just need to say a big thank you to Vanessa and Grant for being bold and pushing on with it and making it happen.
Thank you.
Really do appreciate it.
You, Roxanne.
No problem. Apologies, for some reason I can see every screen but the one I want to share. Always the way. And you don't want to read my emails. Why won't that show? I'm really sorry. Well, you might just see some of my to-do list while I make this happen.
Does that work? I just did it.
Oh, you just did it, Matt. Thanks. I don't know why it wouldn't do it for me. So rather than, I had a bit of a presentation, but everything that Grant and Vanessa have shown, I think you've seen the diagram. So maybe if we play the presentation, but we'll just turn the music off and I'll share a couple of points. I'll let you push play, Matt.
I have the music on, if that's okay. I'll turn it down.
Yeah.
Okay.
So this was Friday. This is one of the first laps of the new Dutch roundabout in Cambridge. And you can see immediately it's already working. This is people using it for the very first time. And it was really smiles all around. I was part of this group of people going around and you know, waving at the cars, giving a thumbs up. They were smiling back at us. You know, it really felt like everybody was getting on board with the journey. You can see several types of cycles going around. So we've already talked about the geometry of the Dutch roundabout, and the experience when you observe and you watch this and you are in the roundabout is you are really able to make eye contact with the other users of the roundabout. So you can see this angle as you're coming around on the bike. You can see that driver without having to bend your neck at an awkward angle or look behind you. You're really having to have that conversation and that negotiation as you go around the roundabout. And that is what I think makes it feel so much safer, as well as having some obvious red tarmac that says, I am allowed to be here. The tighter corners are definitely slowing down cars as they come around. And as I'm explaining to drivers who are nervous about using it, is just take your time and realize that we're actually breaking the decision-making process down for you. So you only have to make one decision at a time. You can exit the roundabout, deal with that. Okay, now I can stop. Now I can look at what the bikes are doing, what the pedestrians are doing. Now I can cross that part. So just breaking it down into phases makes it all a lot more manageable. I would say that observing from certain angles, so I've stood back and watched this roundabout for about an hour to see what people are doing. And there's a few spots, and I haven't had a chance to talk to Vanessa and Grant about this, but there's a few spots where people are still not following the rules of the roundabout. They're doing some strange things when they're cycling. But what I've realized is it's nothing to do with the roundabout design, it's to do with the network design. They can't get to a safe spot on the next roundabout, so they are cycling on the pavement and therefore not using this roundabout as intended. So it just goes to show you can get this roundabout right, but you still need to get all the other parts right so that people can complete the whole journey. Otherwise, they're cutting corners and going up onto the pavement simply to avoid another hazard further along the line. So that just makes our case for us that we now need to go and fix all the other roundabouts in the area and do all the connecting bits in the cycle lanes in between them. I guess people probably want to know a little bit about some of the objections and the politics that we've faced, particularly for CamCycle. We're getting a lot of noise about how it will never work. It's the most dangerous thing out there. And when you question people and you take them down a few steps into, well, why isn't this working? Why don't you think it will work? And it just comes down to the fact that, well, people can't drive. Like, eventually that's what they get to. Like, well, drivers won't know what to do. They'll get confused. They won't give way. And like, well, we need to teach people how to drive, or trust that actually we have designed this in the right way. And if you follow the road rules, it will work. That's this fear, is that drivers just are going to get confused and won't know what to do. Of course, the other one is, well, cyclists won't know what to do. They'll be everywhere. And like, well, the cyclists have priority, so let them go. But again, sitting back and observing this roundabout yesterday, we're still seeing a few people cycling on the road. I think partly that's just people don't know this roundabout is there and how it works, and they're used to taking that primary position on the road. But we definitely do. I saw the most stereotypical lycra-clad, high-speed, middle-aged man in lycra racing through that roundabout on the road and nearly knocking out another cyclist who had right-of-way doing the right thing. So, you know, we're still going to have some of those little problems. But again, you can see how if you were someone that wanted that bit of speed, you're still not going to use the infrastructure because the connecting pieces aren't there yet. And that's no criticism of Vanessa and Grant. That's the piecemeal approach to funding that we have, where you can only get enough funding to do one bit at a time. And I know if you could wave your magic wand, you would have put all the cycle lanes in that lead up to it. We have had a lot of pushback about how much it's cost. And so there's, you know, early figures were thrown out of around £800,000, and £550,000 of that came from Cycle City Ambition funding. But over the course of the years, it certainly cost a lot more than that. I think we're over 2 million at the moment. From my perspective, it's been worth every single penny. For the first roundabout, I think we could have paid twice as much, but to just actually have this roundabout done somewhere in the country is now opening it up for everything else to happen. But locally, what that means for our own budgets is interesting. And I think we need to have a look into, well, what actually caused the costs, because I think that it's being used against cycling infrastructure, and I don't think that's fair. I think there are much more complex issues at play here that have resulted in the expenditure, and we need to understand what that is. And I think if you come from the Netherlands, you basically have a flat packed roundabout kit. You got all the curbs in all the right pieces and all the right geometry, all those things are easy to get. But I imagine Vanessa and Grant could say more on this, but everything's had to essentially be custom built and custom learned. You know, we haven't had the project managers and the contractors and the various people who actually know how to do each of these bits yet. And I think this is a lesson coming from now this gear change vision and all the new things we're now supposed to be able to do. Do we have the people with the skills to actually build it and design it when it comes to making these projects happen? And the other big issue there is the utilities underneath the roundabout. When you do something like this, you basically have to dig up the whole road. And as we know in Cambridge, you have no idea what's actually lurking beneath. Add a pandemic to that and costs go up. But that's certainly been one of the really big things that is being held against this roundabout is the cost. And also people saying it's in the wrong location. I'm like, well, what location would be the right location, really? And as many have said, at least it's close to the hospital. So when all those cyclists get run over, they'll be near the hospital. And that's really, really not a nice sort of conversation to be happening everywhere in social media. A lot of pushback about large vehicles not fitting, but again, I've observed huge vehicles, like really huge vehicles getting through that roundabout. They just have to slow down. And that's the point. They're big, they're dangerous. They need to slow down. But anyway.
It has been auto tracked, Roxanne. So
yeah,
large vehicles can get around.
Yeah. But, you know, it's just, this is the perception that people, you know, out in the community, there's so much fear of something that's different. And we just have to keep pointing out that everything on the road was new and different at one point in time, and we've learned how to use it. And actually, if you're worried about this roundabout, the trick is let's build lots more of them really, really quickly so they become normal and standard and we all know how to use them. And this is just the first one. So from a campaigner's perspective at CamCycle, we're very, very happy with this. And I tell you what, I did a few laps around that. I got off my bike and I jumped up and down with joy because it really is the real deal. We have a piece of Dutch cycling infrastructure in this country now.
I just guess I say a few words. I actually came back from the Netherlands about a week before this opened, coincidentally. I did my little holiday trip, escaped and came back. But over the past few years, I've probably collected hours and hours of footage from roundabouts from Hoek van Holland to Zwolle. So it's nice. I don't have to go so far to get roundabout footage. But I will say, when about 4 years ago, Vanessa probably can correct me here, the Huntington Road parallel crossing opened up, and that was kind of the test bed for this stuff. And it was right on my commute route. So I used it every day for 2 years, 3 years, and basically took notes on it. And it was changed at one point to add the Z-Bright parallel crossing lights, the zebra lights, and that changed everything. Like after that, and that's on a 30-mile-per-hour road, I might mention. After that, I had no trouble getting drivers to stop, really. So if that can work on a 30-mile-per-hour road, I realized then it should have no problem at a roundabout where the geometry is nice and tight and the speeds are much lower. So I think we're seeing that now. Zebra crossings are very, very well recognized piece of infrastructure, and they're effective here as well. Hopefully that continues to be the case. Thanks.
I wasn't really given much of a brief for this one. Brian said, you're working on an interesting roundabout. Talk about something interesting. So this is it's ramble short. So bear with me. It's a bit of a think piece as much as anything else. I thought it'd be interesting. I wanted to start with the idea of campaigning. Being a campaigner, I would suggest, is a relatively simple life because you have a vision and you want to try and implement it, and that's awesome. And basically, you're looking for perfection. And so campaigners have this sort of very important role to play in street design because they're pushing for something that very often they go above and beyond, I suppose. Whereas consultants, with their endless supply of freshly laundered shirts and pearly white teeth, slightly different role to play. They're all about compromise, and I suppose very often what they're trying to do is a bit of a magic trick. They're trying to pull this rabbit out of a hat. and they're trying to negotiate with everybody. They've got all of these different campaigners all over the place, and it might be someone from the taxi lobby, or it might be cycling, or it might be someone talking about accessibility for public transport, whatever it might be. And they're going to balance all of these competing things. And don't worry, I'll talk about roundabouts in a minute, but I think this is particularly relevant to them. What ends up happening very often is you end up with this kind of becoming kind of the catchphrase of this idea that, you know, you don't want perfect to become the good of the enemy. But what that means is you end up sat in this position here. Really, you're trying to do something, but it's never going to be perfect, which is a fantastically frustrating place to be. But equally, it can be used as a sort of this get out of jail free card, really. You can just sort of wave this thing around and say, oh, I'm very sorry, I can't do what you want because I'm just trying to keep everybody happy. And so anyone who has a dream gets told to go away and water it down and come back again when they want. And to be honest, I would suggest that roundabouts are probably the biggest compromise of anything that we design in our streets. I think, as Brian alluded to right at the beginning, I think most traffic engineers have a bit of an aversion to roundabouts. They're done so badly so much of the time in this country that they're very hard things to work with. But the biggest challenge is the fact that they're so fantastically efficient at moving traffic that what you end up with is invariably having to make massive compromises on capacity that becomes politically very difficult to do. Now, if anyone knows Romford, which is in sort of northeast London, you'll know that they like their cars. It's essentially Essex. It is a London borough, Havering, but really it's Essex, and it's got this rather fantastic, rather complete ring road. It's a dual carriageway that goes right the way around the outside of the town centre. It's a massively efficient piece of kit. It's part of Transport for London's strategic road network, and it divides the town centre from neighbourhoods that surround it. And we were asked to look at this and try and come up with something. That's an idea of the sorts of roundabouts and the sort of that image. That's the town centre. That's the back end of one of the big shopping centres that they've got. And so this is the kind of environment that we're dealing with on what is a metropolitan town centre, one of London's 13 metropolitan town centres. And it's been like this for a while. This is essentially as it was opened back in, well, the first phase was opened in the 70s, and then the second phase was completed in the 80s. And almost as soon as that second phase was completed, people have been looking at this thinking, how can we actually make it better now for people who might want to walk into town, who might want to cycle? To be honest, more on the walking side, because you're not allowed to say cycling so much. You kind of get frog marched to the border. But really walking is the thing. How do you get people in and out of the town centre? Unfortunately, lots and lots of fantastic architects and engineers have looked at this ring road and essentially got precisely nowhere with their work thus far. And that's fine from the point of the consultants who have all been paid. But what it means is this is the daily life of everybody much that lives around this ring road. There's a whacking great hospital just outside the ring road. Romford town centre is about to get Crossrail. You know, people want to go in and out of this town centre, and just as a bit of background, Havering as a borough has the highest proportion of elderly people in the whole of London. It's got the highest average age of any borough. It's also had the largest influx of kids of any borough, and it's got the second highest proportion of people with a severe disability. And this is essentially their access into the town centre. It's awful. So those people are between a rock and a hard place. Now, we were asked not so long ago to have a look at this ring road, and particularly the roundabouts, and try and sort something out. And I would love to do this. It'd be great if we could have beaten Cambridge to it and put one of these in. But I'd have been back to essentially telling that lady trying to cross that piece of guard railing that I had a lovely idea and I wish they'd have done it, but unfortunately I couldn't, because it just wouldn't get past the various other campaigners, I suppose, who all want their version of perfection, none of which involve a Dutch roundabout at the moment. So the question comes for me, what can we do? And this is a question for everyone, actually. I think it's a really interesting one. What's worth doing? I suppose it comes back to that idea of perfect being the enemy of the good. Is there something that's worth doing to these roundabouts that improves them substantially, doesn't get to where we want them to be ultimately. And that's, for me, is turbo roundabouts come in. That there is an example of what a turbo roundabout looks like in schematic form. Text is all back to front because unfortunately everyone on the continent drives on the wrong side of the road. So I've flipped it just to make it easier to read. In reality, this is what they look like. And as you'll probably tell instantly from that image, they tend not to go in town centres. They tend to be kind of on, I suppose, your bypass or interurban network, which is fine. And actually it has been a real challenge, I think, in terms of looking at these things and thinking, well, what might offer? It's worth saying that these roundabouts, the ones that have gone in, have fantastic reputations, fantastic records in terms of road safety. They're also really efficient. So they tend to hang on to the best parts of traditional roundabouts and address some of their poorer parts. But they are generally designed for sort of higher speed bits of network. Now, if you know anything about turbo roundabouts in this country, you'll probably know that one went in Ilford and has had a very stormy kind of reception, and probably rightly so. I think lots of claims were made about this roundabout that were probably slightly unfair. I think lots of assumptions were made about this roundabout that were slightly unfair, but it certainly hasn't been the poster child that I think many were hoping it might be. But it's not without its merit. Essentially, if I go back to the previous image, what we're trying to do, what these roundabouts are very good at, is locking cars into a specific lane, using, as was mentioned earlier in the TRL presentation, this idea of continental geometry, forcing cars to slow down, turning tighter turns. And then also, as they approach the roundabout, they're giving way to a single lane. One of the big problems we've got in Romford is that we've got these big, amorphous, wide, empty roundabouts that are very easy to go very quickly through. And lane discipline is awful. So you end up with lots and lots of side swipes as cars basically don't have any lane discipline because there are no lanes. And you end up with a lot of rear end shunts because vehicles coming onto the roundabout aren't quite sure whether or not they're going to make it. You end up with lots of people standing on their brakes and people going in the backs of them. So there's definitely things to be said for these roundabouts. As I say, they're a long way from being fit, but there's lessons we can learn from them and think, well, how can we apply these to different locations? What we've got in Romford, this is an example of one of the roundabouts that we've got there. This is up North Street. That's what it looks like at the moment, and you can just see how little guidance there is for, these things are huge. It's quite hard to get across the scale of these things from above, but they're big things. And what we're looking at doing there is essentially taking this idea of a turbo roundabout and sort of slightly morphing it, adapting it from, if you know anything about spiral markings within DMRB, we're using some of that to throw into this. At the moment, all of these roundabouts contain these big subway networks that we're looking to fill in, but really trying to, I suppose, urbanize these roundabouts slightly and take the best things that we know about turbo roundabouts and apply them here. Now, I'm not claiming that this is going to be utopia for walking and cycling, because I don't think we're there yet. And as I say, for me, it's about doing as much as we possibly can, move things forward in places like Romford, which are still very much on the edge, looking in on this kind of stuff and on these kind of agendas and moving them forwards. And actually, these things don't cost a lot. If I just go back to the previous image again, you'll see that in civil engineering terms, we're changing very little at these roundabouts at the moment as it stands. What we're doing is changing driver behaviour for the better, which hopefully will be to the benefit of all road users, including themselves. So just a sense of what that looks like. There is the North Street roundabout as it is at the moment, and that is hopefully what we're going to end up with once hopefully funding gets reinstated, which is being pulled at the moment due to budgets being reassessed and going elsewhere due to COVID-19. But hopefully it won't be that long. As I say, I don't. It is a compromise, but I think it's one that's worth making at the moment as we're going. This isn't, I suppose, I'd love to be working in Cambridge, or at least with that level of ambition. But London is full of these kind of roundabouts. It doesn't matter. These are just a few examples from Croydon, Harrow and Uxbridge. it's a wash with them. And these bits of kit are too big to fail at the moment. They would cost a fortune to knock down and rebuild, and we're just not in a position to do that. So what happened to these roundabouts? They have these big subway networks that can be done to try and, I suppose, humanize them a little bit and reduce their hostility. Because it comes back to this lady again, and what can we do for her now that isn't going to be held up for the next 20 years, trying to get these things through? What can happen in the short term to make these places better for these people to try and get in and out of these town centres, that actually we know that we can get on with, and we can make a difference with. So there you go. That's my introduction to turbo roundabouts, and where I suppose I think they might fit within our armory. I suppose they're not, as I say, they're never going to be the best of the best, but I think they're something that we need to start considering as a stepping stone to getting to where we want to be, perhaps. Right.
So just on turbo roundabouts, I just pitched this in really quickly. This is somewhere in between Dutch style, between a mix between a turbo roundabout and a regular Dutch roundabout. It's in Nijmegen, just to confuse you all. There is a mix possible with priority for cyclists. But what I really wanted to talk about today is, let's see if we can do the next slide, is about Ede-Wageningen. So that's area somewhere around here, that you know where it is in the Netherlands, Nijmegen, Arnhem, and somewhere to the left of it. And we're planning a cycling highway, but more or less it's actually an improvement of 8 or 9 cycling projects on a continuous string. So we're doing a route of improvements. And we're talking about Bennekom, which is this village, and it's very wealthy, very elderly, about 60 plus people, grey, and very attached to their cars. And we're redesigning some roundabouts which were put in the 90s, and which nowadays look like this. So pretty much an old-style Dutch roundabout, where you can see that there is a raised median, narrowing down the travel lanes. The big problem here is we have got a lot of accidents here, and that's due to one of the main reasons is the small width between the carriageway and the cycle path. So the design, what we have now in place, is this design, and just as discussed, this is of course a trade-off, because you already see that there is a strange bump here, and that had to do with the persons living here. They do want to sell, but only if we would adjust the design, and if we had to do a compulsory purchase, we might have been ending up buying their whole home, which would triple the cost of the roundabout. So what we do, I think these are basics for you, I guess, but extra space between so we're supersizing the roundabout and creating extra space between the cycling path and the car lane, which means it's improved visibility for pedestrian and cyclists, and especially when the car gets off the roundabout, we have extra space for the motorized traffic to wait and give priority to cyclists. And the main reason we see here on these roundabouts, these can be pretty busy during rush hour, is that the pressure in the current design, when a car wants to exit the roundabout and they have to give priority to cyclists, we've got about 6,000 cyclists a day here, they have to stop, but they will block traffic behind them, car traffic. And this increases the load or the pressure on the car driver to just keep going and not block the roundabout by stopping for cyclists. And in this design, we have about 5 meters where the car driver can exit the roundabout, stop, have an easy look in a 90-degree angle if a cyclist comes, and then they can continue. And hereby reducing actually the psychological load and the tasks, the mental load, the mental tasks he has to perform. And within the roundabout, we've got a 50-kilometer-an-hour north-south arterial road, and there's also a 50-kilometer road going west. But going east, we also are using redesign to introduce that 20-mile-an-hour zone. And as you can see, we're having this little cycle path there on the north side, so cyclists can pass an eventual queue of cars waiting to enter the roundabout. This has been really well received. Also because we said to the town people is you now can cross in 2 stages, so it makes it easier for you to cross to enter and exit the roundabout, and it also will increase capacity for cars. And the people in the town really love that, because this town is old and grey, but it connects to a big university down south and a major train station up north. And now to make things even more confusing, this is a new design which we're now also putting in. This is currently a big signalized intersection where the main direction for cyclists is steady, north-south, and the main direction for car traffic is actually that they have to turn to the right in the network design. So currently the intersection actually doesn't really say anything to the car driver except there's a traffic light and we've got a big, a large space for asphalt. But we're going to create an intersection with a cycling roundabout around it. So this is the cyclists will have priority on all traffic, and the cars will first see a zebra, then they will have to cross the cycling path and give priority, and then they come into an intersection with a it's a kind of a speed bump. It's an entrance exit thing. I don't know how to translate it in English.
I think people are asking, can you make it like full screen? That there might be a little bit.
Really? Am I not presenting it full screen? I'm sorry.
No, yeah, it's in a.
No, wait, let me. It's. Is this? Wait.
I think you may have shared the wrong screen, or the.
Yeah, I'm working on two screens. What am I sharing now? Because I'm not used to Zoom.
Yes.
Better?
Yeah, that's full screen. Yeah.
Okay, cool. I'm sorry.
No, that's perfect. Cheers, mate.
And the idea of this cycling roundabout, as we call it, is once again that we highlight the 30k an hour zone. Also very good for the people in the neighborhood is that this road to the east is currently 50k an hour design with 20 mile an hour zone. So we provide extra space for car parking. And when we zoom in, once again, cyclists and pedestrians get priority, and we signalize to motorized traffic that the main road is making a turn. So the main direction is going off and not going through the historical town center. So we're reinforcing the network design for the cars by creating this turn. And more importantly, in terms of speed, I mean access and exit speed on a roundabout is incredibly important. And with this design, there is no car which can go through the intersection at full speed, or because either way you make a turn, or you go straight on and you will hit this big curb, and it forces you to slow down. So that's why we're pretty sure that this will work. And you see here in the a bit darker red, these are bumper zones, which can be used by HGVs or buses to make the really narrow turn which is here in place. And we will probably build this design and implement it next year. And once again, there are also waiting spaces for cars, because the north-west connection has priority within the intersection. It's incredibly complex design, but it fits on a very narrow space of land. So this was an improvisation we had to make. And once again, you still have these bump outs and space between the cycle lane and the roads to have this 90-degree angle in which car drivers can see the cyclists. Different roundabout, I guess, roughly the same story. But with one exception, that we here have an exit exit only with a two-way bicycle lane design and one-way lane for cars. And I didn't translate the comments. I'm sorry for that. Let me get quickly to wait. No, seems my computer is a little bit slow. Yeah. So that was roundabout use in intersections. On this stretch, we have from the west coming a newly planned bidirectional separated cycling path. And we are using the roundabout as a diverter to bring cyclists to the other side of the road with priority. So that further on, we have a layout with one directional bicycle lanes on both sides of the road. But really important is, coming from the Netherlands, you come from here, so we drive on the right. And that lane is physically separated to prevent cyclists from doing an illegal cross just before the roundabout, to not have to do the roughly 270-degree angle. So if you have a cycle lane leading up to the roundabout, most cyclists will do an illegal clockwise circumnavigation of the roundabout. And this is going to be, I'm not sure if this will play to Zoom, but this is from a cycling point of view, a roundabout in Nijmegen. And here you can beautifully see how the van fits in. A car still can pass at the back of the van, but you can also see the driver pretty good. And the same goes for the car, which we see coming in the left corner. He will cross it in front of me, but he's still able to stop to give way to any cars on the roundabouts. Oh, here we go again. And this is a video from the intersection with the roundabout from Groningen. So the Dutch copy also from the other Dutch. And here you can also see the race median and the way people use it. And as you can see, even a bus is able to navigate this intersection. I'm sorry for the sounds, I never proved it. We can keep on going for a while. And the last bit I wanted to show you is the same roundabout as the first one, shown from above, where you can also really clearly see the geometry also here with the buses and the angle in which they look. It's at work. And even you can see the bus coming to a full stop here, and the car is still able to pass the bus, and thereby also once again reducing stress for motorists and increasing visibility. That's it, as quickly and short as possible.
Brilliant. Yeah, no, there was a junction you showed in the middle of there that I think a few of us want to build next. I think we've got our next challenge in the UK there. I made a note of it there. The Strugieweg, the junction with Edithsweg. Yeah, I need to work on my Dutch. But yeah, fantastic stuff.